Of all the tracks in the Mario Kart series, there is one track type that seems to stick out from the rest, and that is the tracks that reference the mainline series. These tracks tend to not only have excellent themes, but they also get fans excited about the reference. Some examples of this track type include Airship Fortress referencing Mario Bros. 3, Delfino Square referencing Mario Sunshine, and Luigi's Mansion referencing the namesake's game. Notice how all of these tracks come from Mario Kart DS. Well, Mario Kart DS has one more track referencing the main series that, in my opinion, makes it the best track in the entire game. I am of course referring to none other than Tick Tock Clock. Tick Tock Clock is amazing not just because of its unique theme, but because it references the main series level perfectly in my opinion. Even though the original does have problems, mainly referring to the visual side of things, the remake definitely fixed those problems and added many things as a good remake should. In this video, I will go over the history of Tick Tock Clock, going over the layout, obstacles, changes added to the remake of this course, and why in my opinion, it is the best track in Mario Kart DS and easily a top 5 track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. As I have mentioned earlier, Tick Tock Clock debuted in Mario Kart DS and is the second track of the Star Cup. Before we get into the track itself, I think that it is important to go over the stage that the track is based on, so let's go over it. In Mario 64, the 14th main stage of the game is Tick Tock Clock. This is a clock-based track, as the name implies. There are many clock elements like swinging pendulums, gears, and clock hands that Mario needs to dodge in order to get to the power stars on the level. The flooring mainly consists of a grid-like cage that's yellow, and this along with all the obstacles mentioned earlier are used in the Mario Kart track, Tick Tock Clock. With the theming and aesthetics now laid out, let's finally get into the layout. The start of the track has you making a left turn, with the flooring being the same yellow cage from Tick Tock Clock. This is obviously a great reference to the stage itself. After a left turn, you will drive on an inclined grid until you finally reach the first clock on the track. These clocks are a completely unique set piece to this track and are not present in the Mario 64 stage. Also, the hands are not used as platforms like in Mario 64, but are instead used as obstacles the player needs to dodge. Personally, this is not a bad change, as having the hands as obstacles makes this and the second clock later a lot more difficult than if they were just platforms. While you could just stay on the outside and avoid the hands pretty easily, there are boost panels placed close to the center of the clock that encourage the player to go close to the hands. After the clock, you will then do a right turn that leads you to a pendulum that swings back and forth on the track. This is a perfect way to include an element of the original stage on the main track. Not only that, but it is fun to use the pattern of the pendulum to plan the route that you need to go in. Once you pass the pendulum, you then do a sharp right turn before you get to another main set piece of the stage, and that is the horizontal gears. These gears spin you in the direction that they are spinning, obviously, and that translates perfectly into Mario Kart. You see, you want to be on the side that pushes you towards the next gear, since it is a lot faster than trying to fight the spinning of the gear. This makes the player really have to pay attention to the direction that the gears are spinning in, so they can maximize their speed. One more thing that you have to be aware of is the fact that there is a pole in the center of every gear. So you have to make sure that you don't run into them and lose a lot of your speed. After that, there are a few more turns that lead into the second clock on the track. This one is quite different from the first one, as there is only one hand with no boost panels anywhere. It is also a lot smaller with item boxes circling it. Since this clock is a lot smaller, it is much harder to avoid the hands, and I think that this is great. Since this is the end of the track, you will always have to be on your toes and make sure that you hold your lead. After the second clock, you will then do a right turn and arrive at the coolest part of the track, the vertical gears. Instead of making this a regular straightaway, the developers had an awesome idea to add two massive gears that spin vertically and in opposite directions of each other. This makes the player have to choose the correct gear to ride on in order to get to the finish line faster and potentially steal the win last second. I also love the fact that the gears are very skinny, making them very hard to stay on, as well as them basically launching the player forward. These two elements are so cool, but sadly they were changed for the worse when this track was remade. But we will get to that shortly. Once the gears are passed, the track is now over. Overall, it is easy to see why this track became such a fan favorite. Not only is it a nice reference to the mainline series, but it has so many elements and decision-making moments that make this track super dynamic. And that is why this track is my favorite in Mario Kart DS. There are some minor flaws on the track, but most of those are actually fixed on the remake of this track. So let's finally get back to the wonderful remake of Tick Tock Clock. Tick Tock Clock has gotten its first and so far only remake in Mario Kart 8, and it's the first track in the game's Lightning Cup. This is actually the first time in the series that I will ever talk about a track being remade in the base game of Mario Kart 8, which means I can confidently say that the track looks incredible. Every track remade in the base game of Mario Kart 8 got massive visual overhauls, and Tick Tock Clock is no exception. The main nitpick I have with the original version of the track is that it feels very barren and is kind of in the middle of nowhere. Of course, this doesn't really matter as the gameplay is insanely good, but it is still a downside nonetheless. The Mario Kart 8 version of this track is so much more lively in every way. There are so many things changed to this course visually that I will go through the layout again and try to point all of them out. The starting line now has an alarm clock built into it, and the flooring throughout the whole track is tiled with wood with metal fencing only being on the side. Also throughout the entire course, there are many gears in the background, once again making this place feel a lot more lively. The first clock seems to be held by these massive blue arms, and the clock itself has glass on it so you can actually see the gears working under it. The area with the pendulums now has a roof, with poles holding the roof up. The sharp turn now has blueprints for a clock, and which is insanely neat. The area with the horizontal gears is completely enclosed with drawings on the walls. The gears are now color-coded blue and red, which show the direction that they spin. The poles now have arrows that show the direction that they are spinning. The second clock now also has glass and the center open, just like the first clock. Also, there's now only half of the clock to drive on. I probably missed many more things, but this video would be even longer if I included them all, so we'll leave it at that. Now it is finally time to go over what matters most, which is the gameplay. And while most of it do improve on the original, there are some things that I think the original did better. Let's start off with the best change by far, and that is the glider. Now right before the gears, there's a glider ramp in the style of Music Park which turns on and off and switching every few seconds. The glider is great as you can now have a second option at the gears section. It also adds to the poles as they are now obstacles the player needs to dodge while gliding. They also have coins which encourage the player to go close to them. This glider does not take the player all the way, so they will still have to use the gears, but this is an excellent addition to the track. The second main change was the addition of many trickable surfaces on the track. This adds a lot to what were just straightaways on the track. The area with the pendulums not only has a second one added, but now they have ramps right before them. This change adds a lot, as now you want to line yourself up correctly to trick and save even more time. Another place that got added trick opportunities is the gear section, as now they are ramps on the edge of the gears. This also adds a lot, as now there's another factor of speed that needs to be optimized and managed in order to not fall off the track. I did say earlier that not all the changes were for the better, and that starts off with the hands. Now they are changed to not damage the player, but instead are used as platforms for shortcuts. I am mixed on this, as adding shortcuts is a good thing since the original was lacking them, but I do miss seeing the hands as obstacles instead of a thing that helps you. One suggestion that I have that could fix this is having their hands turn red, as in this state, they will act as off-road, which slows the player down if they don't have a mushroom. This is the best of both worlds, as the hands will once again be threatening, but they can also be seen as opportunities to skip a part of the track at certain times. Overall, this change wasn't as good as I wish it could have been. The change was still a nice one regardless. The second change made to the track is the ending gears, as now you can trick off of them and they are much wider than on the DS. Both of these changes are for the worst in my opinion. The gears being wider makes them a lot easier to go for and aren't really the risk that they used to be. Also, being able to trick off the gears defeats the point of spinning towards the goal, as you go over them instead of them shooting you towards the goal like on the DS. While that was a bitter note to end this remake on, I do think that many of the changes that were made were for the better and make up for the negative changes made to the track. Now would be the part that I would normally rake all the versions of this track, but since there are only 2 versions, I will instead be doing a comparison. So now is the time that I will answer the question, which is better, the original or remake of Tick Tock Clock? While the remake did mess up some things about the track, I do think that it is better than the original. The addition of the glider, many trickable surfaces, and the massive visual overhaul makes it the better version in my opinion. Just remember that both versions of this track are still absolutely amazing. Tick Tock Clock is an absolutely amazing track and is easily considered one of the fan favorites of Mario Kart DS. And despite the remake messing up a few things, it was still a great remake of a great track. And that is why Tick Tock Clock is my favorite track in Mario Kart DS, and my second favorite track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now you might be wondering, what is my favorite track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? Well, you'll just have to stay tuned to find out the answer to that question. That is all I have to say today. So please leave a like and subscribe in order to see more videos in the future. And I will see you guys on the racetrack. Goodbye.